The wind off the lake was calm that morning, the sun barely rising over the distant treetops, and I was in the middle of tuning up my Harley in the garage when I first heard it, the sound of tires crunching over gravel that didn't belong to any of my vehicles or expected visitors. I stood up, wiped some grease off my hands, and looked out the window. That's when I saw it, a black and white vehicle that looked an awful lot like a police cruiser rolling slowly up the path toward my ranch house. At first, I thought maybe someone reported something, maybe a wild animal, maybe an accident near the lake, but as the car pulled up and stopped near my porch, a man stepped out with a weird kind of confidence. He wasn't just walking like a cop. He was trying to walk like one. His boots were too clean. His sunglasses were too shiny. And the badge clipped to his belt looked odd, like it had never been used for anything other than show. "Mr. Carter?" The man called out in a firm tone, pacing toward me. I stepped out from the garage, eyes scanning him from head to toe. "That's me." "You got a problem?" "I'm Officer Dunbar," he said, flashing a badge so fast I barely got a look at it. "You need to vacate the property immediately. This land has been reported for HOA violations. You're trespassing and subject to immediate removal." Now hold on. That's when my gut told me something was off. First, I knew for a fact there was no HOA jurisdiction here. I bought this property with my own hard-earned cash, off-market, from an older gentleman who made it clear the closest HOA boundary was almost 2 miles down the road. Second, if this guy was an actual cop, where were the backup documents? Where was the warrant? And why the hell was an HOA involved in police action? I walked up slow, calm but firm, and looked him in the eye. "You said your name's Officer Dunbar?" He nodded, squared his shoulders. "That's right. Which department?" I asked, already knowing he didn't expect that question. He hesitated. County law enforcement." "Which county?" I asked again, this time louder. He cleared his throat, then said, "It's a shared jurisdictional matter, we don't need to go into specifics right now. This property has to be cleared today." That was all I needed to hear to confirm what I already suspected. This guy was a fraud. A fake. A damn actor or someone dumb enough to be recruited by the neighborhood busybodies over at the HOA. I folded my arms and looked him over. "You got an eviction order? Court paperwork? Anything signed by a judge?" "This is an emergency enforcement action," he repeated, trying to sound official. "You can comply peacefully or face detainment." I let out a laugh and said, "Buddy, do you even know what you're doing right now? You're trying to impersonate an officer. That's a federal offense. You picked the wrong driveway today." The so-called officer started to get nervous. His posture changed. He stepped back, mumbling something about how he didn't have time for debate. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my phone. "Go ahead, say that again." "I'm recording now." He panicked. "You can't record a police officer without permission." "Oh yeah, I can. Especially on my property. And you just admitted you're enforcing HOA rules while wearing a badge you can't identify and driving a vehicle that, by the way, doesn't have any real department markings." He turned fast and started walking back to the car. "Where you going, Officer Dunbar?" I shouted after him. "Your bluff just got called." He yanked open the door, slammed it shut, and reversed out of my driveway so fast he nearly took out my mailbox. I stood there for a long second, stunned, but not at all surprised. The HOA had been sniffing around since I moved in a few weeks back, poking and prodding with letters, complaints, and random visits from clipboard-carrying retirees who looked like they hadn't smiled in years. But this? This was war. I turned slowly, walked back into my garage, and leaned against the side of the Harley. My heartbeat wasn't racing. I've dealt with way worse in the military, but my brain was on fire. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. This was about someone pretending to be law enforcement. That was a line you don't cross. The HOA president, a woman named Karen, or as the locals called her, Karen with a clipboard, had made it clear from day one that she didn't want me here. I was too loud. Too rugged. Too free. I didn't blend in with her prim and proper neighborhood of golf carts, identical lawns, and afternoon book clubs. I wore leather instead of khakis. I waved a POW flag instead of the HOA's pre-approved, minimalist, garden banners. I didn't conform. And she hated that. But now she'd stepped way out of line. I didn't need to wonder if she sent that fake cop. I knew she did. Who else would go that far just to intimidate me off my own property? And what she didn't know, was that I wasn't alone. Because if she thought I was just some loner ex-vet with a motorcycle and no one watching his back, she was about to get the shock of her HOA-controlled life. I grabbed my phone, flipped to my biker crew group chat, and sent one message. Karen sent a fake cop. Time to ride. Within minutes, I saw those 3 glorious dots pop up on the screen, followed by a dozen replies. On our way. Say no more. Nobody messes with one of ours. I didn't just have friends. I had brothers. And when the HOA's scheme blew up in their face, I wanted witnesses, loud witnesses, with chrome and leather and a zero-tolerance policy for bullies. Let the HOA come. Let Karen come. Let Officer Dunbar come back with whoever he wanted. This time, I wouldn't be alone when I greeted them. By the time the sun had fully risen over the lake, I had a pot of coffee on and a calm fire burning in my chest. Not the kind that made you reckless, but the kind that reminded you of who you are. I'd served my country, lived through combat zones, and seen the worst of what people can do. So when someone sends a coward in a fake uniform to threaten me off land I rightfully own, they're not just picking a fight, they're digging their own hole. The messages kept rolling in. My biker brothers weren't just saying they were coming, they were already on the move. Most of them lived within a 30-minute radius. 1 or 2 were from farther out, but I knew they'd drop everything to be there. That's just how we were. We weren't a gang, not in the outlaw sense. We were veterans, riders, and protectors. Every one of us had a story, and every one of us knew the value of having someone at your back when things turned dark. As I stood out on the deck, watching the breeze ripple across the lake, I spotted Karen's golf cart sitting on the far road like a vulture perched on a branch. She hadn't left after the fake cop ran off. No, she was waiting. Watching. Probably thought her intimidation tactic had worked and I'd start packing. Probably imagined me calling a moving truck, scared out of my boots. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I took a slow sip from my mug, stared back across the field, and smiled. She was about to learn the hard way. By noon, the first rumble came, not from thunder but from a rolling wall of V-twin engines echoing through the trees. 7 bikes came through the trail that led to my property. Big, loud, and proud. And behind those 7? 4 more. Each rider wearing their vest, their story sewn into every patch. A couple had their old military rank badges stitched into the leather. Others had memorial patches for lost brothers. Every one of them had steel in their hearts and loyalty written in their blood. As they parked, dismounted, and greeted me with firm handshakes and knowing nods, Karen's golf cart disappeared. She must have realized something was wrong. But she wasn't fast enough. 20 minutes later, just as we were laughing over a war story from our last cross-country ride, that same fake cop returned. Except this time, he wasn't alone. Riding in a cheap gray SUV, clearly not standard issue, was another man. Shorter, stiffer, with a buzz cut and a plastic-looking badge clipped crookedly to his belt. They both stepped out with way less confidence than before. But what really set things off was what they said. "You're all trespassing," the first guy barked, doing a poor job hiding the tremble in his voice. This land is under HOA authority. All unauthorized gatherings are to be reported and dispersed. HOA authority? Jake, my buddy from the Marines, laughed and stepped forward. You ever say something so dumb even your own mouth wants to slap you? The second guy, who looked like he'd just memorized a few lines from a legal drama on TV, held up his hand. We're here under community enforcement protocols. This area has been reported for noise violations, illegal structures, and aggressive residents. Now I stepped forward. Calm, steady, eyes locked on them. You were here earlier, remember? I said to the first guy. Said you were a cop. Tried to kick me off my land. Now you're doubling down. The first man's jaw twitched. We were just following orders. Whose orders? I pressed. That's when Karen showed up again. This time walking on foot, arms swinging like she was some kind of drill sergeant. She marched right up to us and pointed. This is a private community, she snapped. And these men are here to enforce it. You're hosting a biker rally in a quiet residential zone. There are children here. This is not acceptable. I let out a breath. Karen, you don't control this land. You've been told that. I showed you the title, the deed, and the boundary maps. This property isn't, and never was, part of your HOA. She narrowed her eyes. That land was meant to be part of the HOA. It was supposed to go to a quiet family that respected the neighborhood. Not to some ex-soldier who builds garages and hosts biker cults. Jake's eyes flared. Say that again. Mike, standing just behind me, added, Lady, we buried friends with more honor in their bones than you'll ever understand. Watch your mouth. Karen didn't back down. You're disrupting the community. These men, she pointed at the fake cops, have every right to remove you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Do they? Because neither one of them has shown me an ID, badge number, or warrant. And unless they do, they're not officers, they're impersonators. She folded her arms. You're bluffing. No one's going to care about a few technicalities if this place gets shut down. I turned to my crew, nodded once. Mike pulled out his phone and called the real sheriff. Yeah, he said into the receiver. We got 2 guys here impersonating officers and a woman claiming false legal authority over private land. Come quick. Karen's face went pale. She stepped back like someone just turned off her batteries. The fake officers looked at each other, sweat forming at their brows. You shouldn't have done that, one of them whispered. Oh, I said, I really should have. Because now the game was over. No more pretending. No more threats. No more HOA nonsense. The cavalry was coming, and not for me. And Karen? She'd finally pushed the wrong man too far. It didn't take long before the distant hum of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of law enforcement, but this time, the real kind. Sheriff Lane's black SUV crested the hilltop like a knight on horseback, dust trailing behind it, and I could almost see the disbelief on Karen's face as he pulled onto my property like he owned the place. But he didn't own it, I did. And he knew it, too. Sheriff Lane wasn't just any local cop. He was a veteran himself, someone I'd met at town events and a man who remembered when people stood for something real. He was calm, older, but sharp as ever. The moment he stepped out and saw the fake officers frozen in place near Karen, his hand naturally drifted to the radio on his shoulder. What in the hell am I looking at? He asked, more to himself than anyone else. I stepped forward. Sheriff, glad you could make it. These 2 tried to evict me earlier pretending to be officers. Then they came back with backup, I said, nodding toward Karen, who's been trying to run me out since day 1. The sheriff looked at the 2 men, squinting hard. Names. Right now. Neither of them answered. One opened his mouth, then closed it like a fish out of water. The other muttered, "It was a misunderstanding." "No," Sheriff Lane said, stepping closer, "a misunderstanding is when you knock on the wrong door. You impersonate a peace officer on private property? That's a felony. And lady," he turned to Karen, who was already trying to slip away like a wet cat, "you're not going anywhere either." Karen immediately jumped into full denial mode. "Sheriff, I didn't ask them to impersonate anyone. I simply requested they enforce HOA codes. We have authority." "Not here you don't," he snapped. "This land hasn't been under HOA jurisdiction since it was parceled off 5 years ago. You know that. Hell, you signed the district map. I was under the impression." You don't get to play innocent when your impression lands 2 men in cuffs. By now, a second sheriff's vehicle had arrived. 2 deputies stepped out, real badges, real guns, real professionalism, everything the earlier imposters lacked. One deputy took the fake cops aside, started questioning them while the other approached Karen and asked her to sit tight on a nearby bench. My biker crew watched all of it with arms crossed and expressions of grim satisfaction. No need to say a word. We'd done our part. We'd stood ground without violence, without chaos. Just presence. And when the time came, we'd called the right people. Still, it wasn't over. As the sheriff reviewed my property records, which I'd pulled from a folder in my truck, he nodded, confirming every single word I'd been saying from day one. "Looks airtight to me," he said. "Free and clear, not a single clause about HOA enforcement. And the property line is nearly 400 yards away from their jurisdiction." "So what happens now?" I asked. He glanced toward the deputies cuffing the imposters. "They're getting charged. Impersonating an officer, trespassing, attempted intimidation. That's serious time. As for Karen, she'll be questioned, and I wouldn't be surprised if conspiracy charges follow." Karen, still seated on the bench, shouted, "This is harassment. These bikers threatened me. They don't belong here." One of the deputies raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, there's 10 witnesses here saying otherwise. You can't just say, biker, and hope it makes someone guilty." Karen's face was red with frustration. She stood suddenly, trying to snatch back control. "This whole thing is an embarrassment to the community. This man has motorcycles parked on his lawn. A flag hanging over his porch. It's disgusting." My friend Mike turned to her, speaking low but loud enough for everyone to hear. "That flag says, POWMIA. It's not disgusting, it's respect. Something you clearly don't understand." Jake added, "We fought for your right to scream nonsense. Don't think we won't fight for our brother's right to live in peace." That's when something strange happened. Karen started to cry. Not deep, emotional crying. No. The theatrical kind. The kind meant to gain sympathy. She stumbled a little, waving her hand in the air, babbling something about feeling threatened and veteran trauma. It was as if she realized the narrative had completely slipped from her grip, and she was throwing every excuse she could in the air like confetti, hoping one of them would land. But no one was buying it. Especially not the sheriff. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and cold, "if you feel so unsafe, why'd you organize this stunt? Why'd you send men pretending to be officers instead of filing a legal complaint like a normal citizen?" She didn't have an answer. As the deputies began escorting the 2 imposters to their vehicle, one of them turned to Karen and muttered, "You said we wouldn't get caught." "Keep walking," the deputy said, pushing him forward. That single sentence sealed it. It was over. The moment the cruiser pulled out, carrying the 2 fake officers down the road, Karen stood in the middle of my driveway, surrounded by men who didn't even need to say a word. Her whole world had collapsed, one built on fake power, clipped regulations, and the assumption that no one would stand up to her. But I had. And I wasn't alone. The sheriff turned to me one last time. If she bothers you again, document everything. She won't get a second shot. I appreciate it, Sheriff. He nodded, then turned to his deputies. Let's get statements and wrap this up. My biker brothers stayed until evening. We grilled out, shared stories, and laughed loud enough for Karen to hear from wherever she crawled off to. The mood was light, but the message was heavy. We don't scare easy, and we don't let one of our own get pushed around by anyone. And as the sun dipped below the trees, lighting the lake with gold, I stood by the fire pit and looked out at the property I'd fought to protect. I hadn't just defended my land, I'd reminded an entire community what it means to stand up against bullies, liars, and control freaks hiding behind fake badges and plastic authority. The next morning brought a peace I hadn't felt in weeks. The breeze off the lake was cool, the birds chirped like they hadn't witnessed a dramatic showdown the day before, and my land, was finally quiet. No HOA letters taped to the gate. No fake law enforcement pulling in with sirens and attitude. Just the slow hum of cicadas and the occasional crackle of embers in the fire pit from the night before. I stood on my porch, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. The news was already spreading. Someone from the local station must have caught wind of the sheriff's arrest report because there it was, bold as ever, 2 men arrested for impersonating police in HOA dispute, ongoing investigation into local HOA leadership. Below it, a blurry photo of the fake officer being shoved into the cruiser. I recognized the background, it was taken from my ranch. Someone must have filmed the whole thing from a distance. But what really made me grin was the caption beneath Karen's picture. HOA president accused of conspiracy, harassment. I won't lie. I read that part 3 times before setting my phone down. For weeks, this woman had made my life hell. She tried to micromanage everything from the color of my roof to the angle of my porch light, even though my property wasn't legally hers to manage. She mailed warnings. She sent clipboard warriors to snap pictures of my front yard. She even complained to animal control that my dog looked intimidating. But sending someone to pretend to be a cop? That was desperation. That was power slipping through her fingers. And now, she was paying the price. I spent most of the morning walking the property with a slight smirk on my face. The tire tracks from all those bikes were still embedded in the gravel, and honestly, I was tempted to leave them there. Like scars that tell a story. A message burned into the ground, this land isn't yours to take. Around noon, my buddy Jake returned with his wife to drop off a cooler of leftover food from the cookout. You see the news? He asked, unloading ribs and steak from the back of his truck. Oh, I saw it, I replied. The photo of Karen was a nice touch. He laughed. Man, she looked like a raccoon caught in a spotlight. You think she'll try anything else? I shrugged. Maybe. People like her, they don't learn right away. She's too proud. Too entitled. She might lawyer up, claim she didn't know those guys were impersonators. But she'll be under watch now. HOA's probably gonna vote her out. Jake leaned on the tailgate. If she ever comes back, she'll find 10 of us waiting again. That's the thing, I said. She thought I was alone. That's always their mistake. And it was. Karen, and people like her, live under the illusion that silence equals weakness. That if you don't fight back with immediate noise, you'll just fold under pressure. But she didn't know my kind. We fight with precision. We wait, we watch, and when the time comes, we strike with force and facts. Not tantrums. Later that afternoon, I got a visit from Sheriff Lane. He wasn't in uniform this time, just jeans and a tan button-up. Casual, but still carrying the same quiet authority. Mind if I come up? He asked, standing by the steps of my porch. Anytime, Sheriff. Coffee's hot, Fridge is full. He smiled, stepped up, and took the chair across from mine. Just came to update you. We finished processing the impersonators this morning. Turns out, one of them used to be a mall security guard, other one worked in private security. Both were paid cash, no paperwork, no legal backing. Karen's name came up more than once. No surprise there. She's trying to shift blame, he added. Says she never told them to wear badges, just look official. But we've got text messages from her phone telling one of them to scare him enough to pack up. Her words. I let out a low whistle. Guess she watched one too many crime dramas. She'll be facing charges. Might not do jail time, but she's done as HOA president. County's investigating the whole HOA board now. We found some funny bookkeeping, misused funds, forged compliance notices, even fake maintenance bills. So it was bigger than me. Karen hadn't just been targeting me for being different, she'd been manipulating the entire HOA, using it as her personal power platform. Her little empire of lawn rules and architectural reviews was collapsing brick by brick. You did more than defend yourself, Carter, the sheriff said. You helped us blow the lid off something we should have seen a long time ago. I just wanted peace and quiet, I said. You've earned it. As he left, I watched his truck fade down the road. For the first time since I bought the place, I felt something real settle over me, ownership. Not just on paper, but in spirit. That night, I sat by the water, toes in the cool lake, a cold beer in my hand. My dog lay beside me, tail twitching in his sleep. The stars started to pop through the sky like pinholes, and the moon cast a gentle glow over the trees. No more fake cops. No more threats. No more HOA letters stuck in my gate. Just me, my land, my peace, and the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself the right way. And if Karen or anyone else ever thought about trying again, well, they'd better remember the day my biker crew rolled in, surrounded a fake cop, and made him beg. Because some people don't know when to quit, until they meet the kind of people who don't back down.